A cold call from a neighbor ruined the cozy atmosphere of a festive dinner at my daughter's house on Thanksgiving. "There's someone in your house." My heart started beating faster, and my daughter grabbed the phone, her eyes wide with panic. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The fork clattered against Teresa's plate like a gunshot in the quiet dining room. This year, Thanksgiving will be at my house. No discussion. Jacqueline's heels clicked against our hardwood floor as she paced, her phone already buzzing in her manicured hand. I set down my sandwich, turkey and mustard, suddenly tasteless. 30 years. For 30 years, we'd hosted Thanksgiving in this house, around this very table where Teresa and I had just been sharing a peaceful lunch. "Jackie, sweetheart, what's this about? We always. She waved her hand dismissively, scrolling through messages. "Dad, traditions evolve. People change." Her tone carried the same coldness she'd use with a difficult client. "My house is bigger, more modern. Herbert's been working on the dining room renovation." Teresa found her voice, though it trembled. "But honey, I already bought the turkey, 22 pounds for everyone, and I've been planning the menu for weeks. Give it to homeless people or something." Jacqueline didn't even look up from her screen. The blue light reflected off her face, making her seem like a stranger. "They need it more than we do." I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. Something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't my daughter speaking. This was someone else wearing Jackie's face, using Jackie's voice. "Jackie, look at me, please." She sighed with theatrical exasperation and lifted her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. "What, Dad? Since when do you make unilateral decisions about family traditions? Since when do you walk into our house without knocking and announce changes like you're running a board meeting?" Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down immediately. "Since I grew up and realized that clinging to outdated traditions doesn't benefit anyone. My house has better parking, better kitchen space, and frankly, better everything." Teresa's hand shook as she reached for her water glass. I watched my wife of 42 years shrink in her chair, watched the light dim in her eyes. The woman who'd spent countless hours perfecting her stuffing recipe, who'd sewn autumn tablecloths by hand, who'd already started thawing the cranberries. "This isn't about logistics, Jackie." I kept my voice steady, though my hands were clenched. "This is about family, about continuity, about your need to control everything." Her thumb moved rapidly across the phone screen. "Herbert and I have discussed this. It makes more sense." Herbert? Of course. That man who'd never once offered to help with dishes, who spent last Christmas calculating the cost of our gift exchange instead of participating in it, who'd married my daughter and somehow convinced her that everything we'd built together was worthless. "Jackie!" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Put the phone down. Look at your mother." For a moment, something flickered across her face. Something that might have been the daughter I raised, the girl who used to beg to help with the turkey, who'd spent hours learning Teresa's pie crust technique. But then her phone buzzed again, and whatever I'd seen vanished. "I have to go. Herbert's picking me up in 10 minutes. We're looking at new dining chairs." She turned toward the door, then paused without looking back. "Oh, and Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Change happens. Deal with it." The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the family photos on the hallway wall. Teresa and I sat in the sudden silence, the half-eaten sandwiches growing cold between us. Outside, a car door slammed, an engine started, and my daughter drove away from the home, where she'd learned to walk, talk, and apparently forget everything we'd taught her about love. Teresa's hands trembled as she stirred the pasta sauce, the wooden spoon tapping against the pot's edge in an irregular rhythm. I rotated my coffee cup on the kitchen table, the same nervous habit I'd developed during layoffs at the plant. Neither of us had mentioned yesterday's confrontation, but it hung between us like smoke. "Louis!" Teresa's voice cut through the kitchen's warm hum. She turned from the stove, her face drawn with worry. "We need to talk about what's happening to our daughter." I looked up from the coffee I'd been pretending to drink. Maybe she's just stressed. Herbert's business ventures, the new house payments. No. Teresa wiped her hands on her apron and sat across from me. This started long before any financial pressure. This started when she married him. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, our familiar evening routine disrupted by the weight of unspoken fears. Teresa reached across the table and pulled out the photo album she'd retrieved from the living room earlier. Her fingers traced the leather cover, worn smooth by decades of family gatherings. Remember Michael? She opened to a page showing Jackie's first husband at our kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, helping me repair a cabinet hinge. Remember how he'd come out to the garage with you? How he'd ask about your father's carpentry tools? I did remember. Michael asking genuine questions about wood grain and joint techniques. Michael who'd spent Christmas morning on the floor, assembling toys with the grandchildren we'd hoped for but never had. Michael who'd loved Jackie for exactly who she was. Herbert has never once set foot in that garage. Teresa turned the page to show our last Christmas together. Look at this picture, Louis. Really look. In the photo, Herbert stood apart from our family circle, checking his phone while the rest of us unwrapped gifts. Even in a moment of celebration, he seemed to be calculating something, measuring the cost of our joy. He talks about money constantly, Teresa continued. Every conversation somehow becomes about real estate values or investment opportunities or how much things cost. Remember when I mentioned redecorating the guest room? He immediately started calculating square footage and resale impact. Maybe he's just practical. Teresa's voice sharpened. Louis, when has Jackie ever cared about having the bigger, more modern anything? She used to say our house felt like a hug. She used to beg us never to change anything. I stared at the photo, at my daughter's smile that seemed forced, at Herbert's arm around her waist that looked more possessive than affectionate. Teresa turned to another page, showing Jackie at 8 years old, flower in her hair, standing on a step stool to reach the counter while Teresa taught her to make pie crust. She used to call me every Sunday, Teresa whispered. Now, I'm lucky if I hear from her twice a month. And when she does call, it's like she's reading from a script. How are you? That's nice. We're busy. Talk soon. The pasta timer chimed, but neither of us moved. Teresa closed the album and placed her hand over mine. A mother's heart doesn't lie, Louis. Something's wrong. Something's been wrong for months. I squeezed her hand, feeling the calluses from 40 years of caring for our family, our home, our life together. Outside, the November wind rattled our windows, but inside our kitchen, with its familiar scratches on the table and the slightly crooked cabinet door I'd never quite fixed properly, everything felt solid, real. What do you think we should do? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Teresa looked toward the living room, where our Thanksgiving dishes waited in the china cabinet, where the table waited to be extended and dressed with her grandmother's lace tablecloth. I think we prepare for the worst and hope we're wrong. But even as she said it, I could see in her eyes the same terrible certainty that was growing in my chest. Our daughter was slipping away from us, and somehow Herbert was pulling the strings. The living room lamp cast circles of warm light across the photo album as I settled into my leather armchair. Teresa had given me space after dinner, retreating to the kitchen to finish cleaning up, but the album remained on the side table where she'd left it. I couldn't resist opening it again. Page by page, I traveled backward through time. Here was Jackie at 16, rolling her eyes at my camera, but unable to hide her smile as she arranged autumn leaves in the centerpiece. Here she was, at 12, standing on a chair to reach the top shelf of the china cabinet, carefully lifting down the good plates with the concentration of a surgeon. I stopped at a photo from 1988. Jackie, 8 years old, wearing Teresa's old apron tied twice around her tiny waist. Her face was serious with responsibility as she held the electric mixer. Chocolate batter splattered across her cheek. Teresa stood behind her, hands guiding small fingers, both of them laughing at something I'd said from behind the camera. She insisted on doing everything herself that year. I murmured to the empty room, remembering. The way she dragged a chair from the dining room to reach the spice rack. How she'd counted out exactly 12 dinner rolls, one for each family member and guest. The pride in her voice when she announced that she'd made the whole entire meal with Mama. I turned the page, Jackie at 15, carving her first turkey under my supervision. Her tongue poking out slightly in concentration, the same expression she'd worn learning to ride a bicycle, to drive a car, to navigate the complexities of growing up in a family that loved her unconditionally. The girl in these photos glowed with curiosity about everything we did. She'd peppered me with questions about why we used certain recipes, why great-grandma's dishes came out only for special occasions, why we always said grace even though we weren't particularly religious. She'd wanted to understand the why behind every tradition, to carry forward not just the actions, but the meaning. Where did that girl go? The question escaped before I could stop it. I found the graduation photo from her business program. Jackie standing between Teresa and me, her diploma held high, her smile genuine and bright. She'd hugged us both that day, thanked us for believing in her, promised to make us proud. For years afterward, she'd succeeded. Good job, good first marriage, regular visits home. Then Herbert appeared in the photos. At first, just background presence at family gatherings. Then closer to Jackie. Then the photos started changing. Fewer genuine smiles, more staged poses. Jackie's natural warmth gradually replaced by something more polished, more calculated. "Louis?" Teresa's voice came softly from the doorway. She'd finished in the kitchen and stood holding 2 cups of tea, concern written across her face. I was just looking at the old photos. I accepted the tea gratefully, its warmth spreading through my hands, trying to understand when we lost her. Teresa settled on the couch beside my chair, studying the open album. "Remember that Thanksgiving when she was 10? She spent the entire morning making place cards for everyone, hand-drawn turkeys with our names in her best cursive. She made me sit in the guest of honor seat because I'd helped her with her math homework the night before." The memory brought a smile despite my heavy mood. She said anyone who explained fractions deserved the best spot at the table. She used to treasure these gatherings. Teresa reached over and turned to a photo of Jackie helping me carve the turkey at 16. "Look at her face there. She's not just participating, she's absorbing everything, like she was memorizing the recipe for family happiness." We sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd built a life together around the simple principle that family mattered most. The photos spread between us told the story of that belief in action. Birthday parties and Christmas mornings, first days of school and graduation ceremonies, quiet Sunday dinners and elaborate holiday feasts. "She used to say this house felt like a hug," Teresa whispered, echoing her earlier words. "Now she acts like it's a prison she's escaped from." I closed the album gently, my hands lingering on the cover. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts to understand what had happened to our daughter. But tonight, in this room filled with the echoes of better times, I let myself grieve for the girl who'd grown up believing that family traditions were love made visible. That girl was still somewhere inside the woman who'd walked into our house yesterday and dismissed 30 years of shared memories. I had to believe that, because the alternative, that she was truly gone, was too painful to accept. My daughter's name flashed across the phone screen as I sat in my favorite chair, the photo album still open on my lap. 2 days since her shocking announcement, and now she was calling back. Maybe she'd reconsidered. Maybe the girl in these pictures was still alive somewhere inside the woman who'd walked out on our traditions. I carried the phone to my home office for better reception, hoping Teresa wouldn't catch the desperate optimism in my voice. "Jackie, how are you, sweetheart?" "Hello, Dad." Her tone hit me like cold water, formal, distant, like she was reading from a business script. "I'm calling to formally invite you and Mom to Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow at 6 p.m. sharp." Formally invite? Since when did my own daughter formally invite me to anything? I sank into my desk chair, already reaching for a pen out of habit. "Of course we'll be there, honey, but..." "Good. The address is 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. Please don't be late." She rattled off the address like I'd never been to her house before, like I hadn't helped Herbert install their new garage door last spring. "Jackie, I know where you live." I wrote down the address anyway, my engineer's mind automatically noting details even when they seemed pointless. "Are you feeling all right? You sound..." "I sound what, Dad?" "Different, cold, like someone else entirely." "Nothing, sweetheart, just checking." From the kitchen, I could hear Teresa pause her dinner preparations, no doubt straining to catch every word. "Can I ask why the sudden change to your house? Yesterday you seemed pretty set on having things your way, but Herbert's mother will be joining us." The words came out rushed, practiced. "She wants to see how well I can host a family gathering. It's important for our future together." Herbert's mother. In all the years I'd known that man, he'd mentioned his mother exactly twice. Both times to explain why he couldn't visit during holidays, because she lived in Florida and had health problems. Now suddenly she was healthy enough to travel to Michigan in November? That's wonderful that she can make it. I kept my voice neutral while my mind cataloged inconsistencies. How long has this been planned? You didn't mention it Monday when it came up recently. Jackie cut me off. The point is, we're starting new traditions for our new family. This is how things will be from now on. New family. The phrase stuck in my throat like a bone. Teresa appeared in the doorway, her face creased with concern as she watched me scribble notes I didn't need to take. Jackie, about Monday. Dad, I really have to go. Herbert's picking me up in 5 minutes. We're shopping for a new dining set. Her voice carried the same impatience she'd shown when dismissing our turkey, our traditions, our 30 years of shared memories. Just be there at 6, on time. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, then at my notes. 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. As if I could forget the address of the house I'd helped them move into, the house where I'd spent weekends fixing Herbert's amateur repair attempts. What was that about? Teresa whispered from the doorway. I looked down at my handwriting, the address underlined twice, the time circled, Herbert's mother with a question mark beside it. My engineer's mind had automatically documented the conversation, but my father's heart was struggling to process why documentation felt necessary when talking to my own daughter. She wanted to make sure we had the address. I set the pen down carefully. And to remind us not to be late. Teresa stepped into the office, her apron still tied around her waist. Louis, when has Jackie ever talked to you like that? Like you're a stranger she's doing business with? I couldn't answer, because the truth was too painful to speak aloud. She hadn't talked to me like her father in months. Tonight's call had just made it official. Teresa sat on the edge of our bed, removing her earrings with hands that trembled slightly. I unbuttoned my shirt slowly, my mind still replaying that strange phone call. Something about Jackie's tone, her rushed explanations, Herbert's suddenly mobile mother. Louis, Teresa's voice cut through the evening quiet. I've been thinking about the last 3 Thanksgivings. I hung my shirt in the closet, giving myself time before answering. 3 years, 3 increasingly difficult family gatherings that had left us all walking on eggshells. What about them? Each one's been worse than the last. Teresa turned toward me, her face pale in the lamplight. Remember, 2 years ago, Jackie and Herbert arrived an hour late, spent the entire meal discussing real estate investments, then left before dessert because Herbert had a business call. I remembered. Just like I remembered last year's disaster when Herbert had criticized Teresa's cooking methods in front of everyone, suggesting she use a meat thermometer because food safety was serious business. Jackie had said nothing, just sat there while her husband insulted the woman who taught her everything she knew about cooking. And the year before that, Teresa continued, Jackie spent the whole dinner on her phone, taking calls from Herbert about some deal he was working. She barely spoke to us except to complain that our Wi-Fi was too slow. I sat beside her on the bed, the mattress dipping under my weight. Maybe this year will be different. Maybe having his mother there will... Louis. Teresa's voice carried the certainty that comes from 42 years of marriage, 42 years of reading each other's fears. What if it's not different? What if it's worse? Worse. The word hung between us like a threat. I thought about Jackie's formal tone, her insistence on punctuality, her rush to end our conversation. The daughter who used to call just to chat, who used to ask my advice about everything from career decisions to recipe modifications. She doesn't sound like herself anymore, I admitted quietly. She hasn't sounded like herself since she married him. Teresa leaned against my shoulder, seeking the comfort we'd always found in each other. I have a bad feeling about tomorrow, Louis. I can't shake it. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling her body's familiar warmth against the chill that had settled in my chest. What kind of bad feeling? The kind a mother gets when something's wrong with her child. Teresa's voice dropped to a whisper. The kind that's never been wrong before. I wanted to argue, wanted to rationalize away her maternal intuition with logic and hope and desperate love for our daughter. But Teresa's instincts had guided our family through Jackie's childhood illnesses, teenage rebellions, and adult heartbreaks. When Teresa sensed trouble, trouble usually followed. We'll go, I said finally. We'll be there at 6, on time, with your apple pie and our best behavior. We'll try to make it work. And if it doesn't work... Teresa pulled back to look at me, her eyes reflecting fears I didn't want to acknowledge. If she's really chosen Herbert's way over ours, if we're not welcome in our own daughter's life anymore, I had no answer. Because deep down, beneath my hopes and rationalizations, I was beginning to fear that we'd already lost her, that the girl in the photo album was gone, replaced by someone who saw us as obligations rather than family. "Let's just get through tomorrow," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Teresa nodded and settled against my chest, but I could feel the tension in her body, the worry that wouldn't let her rest. We lay in the darkness of our bedroom, two people who had built a life around love and family traditions, trying not to think about what tomorrow might bring. Outside, November wind rattled our windows. Inside, we held each other and pretended we weren't afraid. Teresa's hands moved with practiced precision as she rolled out the pie dough, flour dusting the kitchen counter like snow. I sat at our table peeling apples, the familiar ritual offering some comfort despite tomorrow's uncertainties. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and butter, scents that had marked every Thanksgiving of our marriage. "Hand me the Honey-Crisp apples," Teresa said, without looking up from her work. Michael always said my apple pie was the best part of any meal. Michael, again. I passed her the bowl of sliced apples, noting how her voice softened when she mentioned Jackie's first husband. "He did appreciate your cooking. He appreciated everything about our family." Teresa began layering apples into the crust with the same care she'd shown for 30 years. "Remember how he'd sit right there where you're sitting, asking about my grandmother's recipes, writing them down like they were precious family heirlooms?" I remembered. Michael sprawled in my chair, sleeves rolled up, taking notes while Teresa explained the difference between tart and sweet apples, why she used both lemon juice and zest, how the secret to perfect crust was keeping everything cold. He genuinely wanted to learn, to become part of our traditions. "Herbert's never asked for a single recipe," Teresa continued, sprinkling sugar and spices over the apples. "In 3 years of marriage to our daughter, he's never once shown interest in anything we do. He just calculates." She was right. Last Christmas, while Teresa had been explaining her stuffing technique to Carolyn Stevens, Herbert had been using his phone calculator to figure out the cost per serving of our meal. When Albert Tucker had complimented Teresa's gravy, Herbert had mentioned that store-bought was more economical. "Maybe he's just awkward around family," I offered, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. "Louis." Teresa paused in her pie construction to look at me directly. "Awkward people still show appreciation. Awkward people still say thank you when someone spends hours cooking for them. Herbert doesn't even pretend to care." I watched her crimp the edges of the pie crust with quick, efficient motions learned from her own mother. This kitchen had seen thousands of meals prepared with love, countless holidays celebrated around food that was never just about sustenance. Teresa cooked the way other people wrote poetry. Every dish was an expression of care. "And Jackie just lets him," Teresa continued, sliding the pie into the oven. "She sits there while he dismisses everything we've taught her, everything we've shared with her, like our traditions are embarrassing instead of precious." The oven timer clicked as Teresa set it for 45 minutes. Soon the kitchen would fill with the aroma of baking apples and butter, the smell that had marked every successful Thanksgiving of my adult life. But instead of anticipation, I felt only dread. "She used to help me make this pie every year," Teresa said quietly, wiping flour from her hands. "Starting when she was 8, standing on that step stool, measuring ingredients, learning family secrets. She said she wanted to make it for her own children someday." I thought about those long-ago afternoons, Jackie's small hands carefully crimping dough under Teresa's patient guidance. The questions she'd asked, the pride she'd taken in each small success. When had that eager little girl become someone who viewed our traditions as obstacles to overcome? "Money," I said finally. "Herbert's made everything about money. Their house, their cars, their status. Somehow he's convinced Jackie that we're holding her back from something better." Teresa sat across from me, her work finished except for the waiting. Better than what? Better than family who loves her? Better than traditions that connect her to generations of women who kept families together? The question hung between us, unanswerable. Outside, other families were gathering, other kitchens were filling with the sounds and smells of holiday preparation. But in our kitchen, two people who devoted their lives to family were preparing to visit a daughter who seemed to wish they didn't exist. I reached across the table and took Teresa's flour-dusted hand. Whatever happens tonight, we'll handle it together, the way we always have. She squeezed my fingers, but her eyes remained troubled. I just hope there's still something left of our Jackie to handle. The drive to Jackie's house passed in uncomfortable silence, Teresa cradling her apple pie like a peace offering. Her townhouse loomed before us, all sharp angles and modern lines, nothing like the warm brick home where Jackie had grown up. I carried the pie to the front door while Teresa smoothed her dress, both of us preparing for whatever version of our daughter we'd encounter tonight. Jackie opened the door with a smile that never reached her eyes. "You made it." Her gaze immediately dropped to the pie in my hands. "How traditional of you, Mom." The word traditional dripped with the same disdain Herbert used when discussing our outdated furniture or inefficient appliances. Teresa's face tightened, but she managed to smile as we stepped inside. "Jacqueline, your guests have arrived," a cheerful voice called from the living area. A woman with auburn hair approached us, wineglass in hand. "You must be Louie and Teresa. I'm Carolyn Stevens from Jackie's work, and this is my husband, Melvin." Melvin nodded politely from the couch, clearly more comfortable observing than participating in small talk. I shook hands with both of them, noting how Carolyn's warmth contrasted sharply with our daughter's rigid politeness. "Where should I put this?" Teresa asked, still holding the pie. "Oh, just set it with the other desserts." Jackie waved toward the kitchen without looking. Herbert's mother sent a professional cheesecake from that bakery downtown, much more sophisticated than... She didn't finish the sentence, but the comparison hung in the air like smoke. Teresa's homemade pie, with its hand-crimped edges and imperfect lattice work, suddenly looked shabby next to the pristine store-bought offerings arranged on the granite counter. "Speaking of Herbert," Jackie continued, checking her phone, "he's running late. His mother's flight was delayed in Chicago. He had to rush to the airport. On Thanksgiving." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Couldn't she take a later flight? Or maybe we could wait?" "Absolutely not." Jackie's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "She's elderly, traveling alone. Herbert needs to be there when she lands. We'll start without him." Something about her explanation felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Herbert had mentioned his mother exactly twice in 3 years, both times to explain his absence from our gatherings. Now suddenly she was important enough to interrupt Thanksgiving dinner? "Of course," Teresa murmured, though I caught the slight frown that crossed her face. "Family comes first." We moved to the dining area, where Jackie had set a formal table with wedding china and crystal glasses that caught the light from her modern chandelier. Everything was perfect, sterile, nothing like the comfortable chaos of our family dinners, where mismatched dishes and well-worn tablecloths told stories of decades spent together. Carolyn tried to fill the silence with cheerful chatter about work projects and holiday plans, but her efforts only highlighted the tension radiating from our daughter. Jackie kept checking her phone, glancing toward the window, adjusting place settings that were already perfectly arranged. "Your home is lovely," Teresa offered, settling into her assigned seat. "That kitchen renovation turned out beautifully. Herbert designed it himself." Jackie's response was automatic, distracted. "He has excellent taste in modern aesthetics." Modern aesthetics. When had my daughter started speaking like a design magazine? When had she stopped being the girl who'd helped me build a treehouse with crooked boards and bent nails, who'd treasured imperfection because it meant we'd made something together? Herbert's phone buzzed from the kitchen counter where he'd left it. Jackie nearly knocked over her water glass reaching for it, her face pale as she read the message. "Everything all right?" Melvin asked quietly. "Fine. Just Herbert updating me about his mother's arrival." Jackie forced another smile. "Should we begin? The turkey's getting cold." As we settled around her perfect table, in her perfect house, with her perfect store-bought desserts, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all actors in a play written by someone else. Someone who'd convinced my daughter that everything we'd given her, everything we'd taught her, wasn't good enough anymore. My phone buzzed against my leg just as Carolyn was describing her latest marketing campaign. Albert's name appeared on the screen, and I almost smiled. My old friend always called on holidays, usually with some story about his latest woodworking project or a complaint about the neighborhood kids. I declined the call with an apologetic gesture toward our dinner companions. "My neighbor Albert, he probably wants to wish us happy Thanksgiving." "How sweet," Carolyn said, raising her wine glass. "To thoughtful neighbors and family traditions." We toasted, though Jackie's smile remained strained. She kept glancing toward the kitchen, toward Herbert's abandoned phone, toward the window overlooking the driveway. The turkey sat largely untouched on her plate. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Albert. This time, I felt a flicker of annoyance. He knew I was at Jackie's for dinner. Why the persistence? I declined again, but Jackie's head snapped up at the sound. Her fork clattered against her plate as she reached for her water glass with shaking hands. Popular man, Melvin observed with gentle humor. Albert's not usually... I started to explain, then stopped as my phone immediately began buzzing again. 3 calls in 5 minutes wasn't like Albert at all. He was considerate, respectful of other people's time. If he was calling repeatedly, something was wrong. Maybe you should answer it, Teresa suggested, her maternal instincts picking up on my growing concern. No. Jackie's voice came out sharper than intended, causing everyone to look at her. She quickly softened her tone. I mean, you shouldn't interrupt dinner for a social call. It can wait. But my phone was already ringing again, Albert's name insistent on the screen. This wasn't social calling behavior. This was urgent. I think I should take this, I said, starting to rise from my chair. Wait. Jackie stood abruptly, her napkin falling to the floor. If you're going to answer, I'll come help you. I need to check on dessert anyway and get the coffee started. She was beside me before I could object, her hand hovering near my arm as we walked toward the kitchen. Behind us, Carolyn was trying to engage Teresa and Melvin in conversation about travel plans, but I could feel their attention following our movement. Albert doesn't usually call this much, I murmured to Jackie as we reached the kitchen island. Sometimes people get lonely on holidays, she replied, but her voice sounded hollow, distracted. She moved to the sink and began rinsing dishes that were already clean, the water running unnecessarily loud. My phone buzzed again. 5th call. Something was definitely wrong. I looked at Jackie, expecting to see concern, but her face had gone white as paper. Her hands gripped the edge of the sink like she might fall over. Jackie, are you feeling all right? Fine. She didn't turn around. Just answer the phone, Dad. Get it over with. Get it over with. Strange words for someone who just insisted I shouldn't take the call at all. I pressed the answer button, and Albert's familiar voice filled the kitchen, urgent and worried. Louie? Louie, thank goodness. Are you at your daughter's house? Yes, we're having dinner. Albert, There's someone in your house. The words hit me like ice water. What did you say? I need to put you on speaker, Albert. My hearing. I fumbled with the phone, my fingers suddenly clumsy. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of running water, where Jackie continued her frantic dishwashing. Louie, I've been watching your house for the past 20 minutes. Albert's voice filled the kitchen through the speaker, clear and urgent. There are lights moving around inside, flashlight beams. Someone's definitely in there. Jackie's hands stilled at the sink. I could see her reflection in the window above it, her face ghostly pale, her eyes wide with what looked like terror. Are you sure? I asked, though Albert had been keeping an eye on our neighborhood for decades. If he said someone was in my house, someone was in my house. Positive. I saw them go in through your back door about 25 minutes ago. Whoever it is, they're being methodical. Started in your living room, now they're in what looks like your study. My study, where I kept my important papers, my grandfather's watch, the safe with our emergency cash, and Teresa's jewelry. My blood pressure spiked as the implications hit me. Louie, you need to call the police, right now. This isn't some random break-in. They know exactly where they're going. Jackie spun around from the sink, her face a mask of panic. She took a step toward me, then another, her hand reaching out as if to grab the phone. Dad, maybe we should... Jackie, call 911, I ordered, not taking my eyes off the phone. Albert, can you see them now? They're in your study. The light's been steady in there for the past 5 minutes. Louie, they're not just looking around. They're after something specific. The safe, my coin collection. $50,000 in gold coins that I'd been collecting since Jackie was a baby. My retirement security that only family knew about. Only someone who'd been in my study, who'd seen me open the safe, who knew. Jackie lunged forward and grabbed my phone with both hands. Jackie, what are you... She yanked it away from me and hurled it against the kitchen floor with such violence that it exploded into pieces, the battery skittering across the tiles, the screen shattering into a spider web of broken glass. Oops! Her voice came out too high, too bright. Sorry, Dad. Clumsy hands. Good thing it was just just a neighbor calling about nothing important. I stared at the phone fragments scattered across her pristine floor, then at my daughter's face. Her smile was wide and desperate, her eyes darting between me and the broken device like a trapped animal looking for escape. "Jackie!" My voice came out quiet, deadly calm. "Why did you just destroy my phone?" "It was an accident. I was just trying to... We should get back to dinner. Our guests are waiting." But I wasn't moving, because suddenly everything was clicking into place. Herbert's convenient airport trip, Jackie's insistence that we arrive exactly at 6, her panic at Albert's calls, her knowledge of our house, our routines, our safe. "You knew," I whispered. "Knew what?" "Dad, you're being paranoid. Let's just go back and... You knew someone was in our house." Jackie's forced smile finally cracked. "That's ridiculous. Why would I know something like that?" But she couldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, looking at my daughter's guilty face surrounded by the wreckage of my phone, I understood that I was looking at a stranger, someone who could betray her own family for money, someone who could smile and serve turkey while her husband robbed the people who'd raised her. Jackie scrambled around the kitchen floor, gathering pieces of my shattered phone like evidence at a crime scene. Her hands shook as she swept fragments into her palm, chattering with forced brightness about buying me a replacement, about how clumsy she'd always been, about accidents happening to everyone. I watched her performance with growing clarity. Every nervous laugh, every over-explanation, every desperate glance toward the dining room where her innocent guests waited. It all confirmed what I already knew. My daughter was part of whatever was happening in my house right now. "Jackie!" My voice came out rougher than I intended. She looked up from the floor, phone pieces clutched in her fists. "Yes, Dad?" I pressed my hand to my chest, letting my breathing become shallow and labored. 40 years of watching Teresa's medical shows had taught me how a heart episode should look. "I'm not feeling well." "What?" Teresa appeared in the kitchen doorway, her maternal radar immediately activated. "Louis, what's wrong?" "Chest pain." I leaned against the counter, adding a slight tremor to my voice. "Pressure here." I indicated the spot with practiced precision, knowing Teresa would recognize the symptoms. "Oh no." Carolyn's voice carried from behind Teresa. "Should we call an ambulance?" No. I straightened slightly, playing the stubborn man who doesn't want to worry anyone. "Just need my medication. It's at home, in the bathroom cabinet." Jackie stepped forward, panic written across her face for entirely different reasons than the others. "Dad, maybe Herbert could pick it up when he gets back from the airport. You shouldn't drive when you're not feeling well." "Herbert won't be back for hours," I said, adding a note of breathlessness. "His mother's flight, remember? I'll be fine. Just need some fresh air and my pills." Teresa was beside me now, checking my pulse with gentle fingers. "Your heart's racing, Louis. Maybe we should... The medication will help." I squeezed her hand reassuringly. 15 minutes there and back. The drive will do me good. Fresh air always helps with these episodes." "I could drive you," Melvin offered from the doorway. "Absolutely not." I forced a weak smile. "You're our daughter's guests. Besides, I know exactly where the pills are, what I need. Better to handle it myself." Jackie's eyes darted between me and the door, calculations racing behind them. She was trapped. Too insistent about stopping me would look suspicious, but letting me leave meant I might discover what I already knew. "Maybe you should stay put, Dad. Rest here until you feel better." "Jackie, when your father has chest pains, he takes his medication," Teresa said firmly. "Louis, you go. Drive carefully. We'll wait dinner until you get back." I kissed Teresa's forehead, tasting the salt of worry on her skin. "Keep everyone company. I'll return soon with the pills, feeling much better." As I moved toward the door, Jackie made one last desperate attempt. "Dad, are you sure you shouldn't stay? What if something happens while you're driving?" I paused, looking directly into her eyes. "What could happen, Jackie? What exactly are you worried about?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Because we both knew she couldn't voice her real fear, that I'd discover her husband robbing the home where she'd grown up, stealing from the parents who'd given her everything. "Nothing," she whispered. "Just drive safely." I nodded and walked out into the November cold, dropping the chest pain act the moment the door closed behind me. My heart was racing, but not from any medical condition, from anticipation. Because I was about to catch a thief red-handed, and that thief was married to my daughter, My key turned silently in the front door lock, a mechanism I'd oiled religiously for 30 years. The house felt different, violated, with foreign presence contaminating spaces where Teresa and I had built our life together. But I moved through the familiar darkness like a ghost, every creaking floorboard mapped in my memory. Light flickered from my study. Not the warm glow of my desk lamp, but the harsh beam of a flashlight cutting through shadows. I approached the doorway with controlled steps, my engineer's mind cataloging what I was about to witness. Criminal activity, evidence, betrayal made tangible. Herbert stood at my open safe, my grandfather's gold coins gleaming in his hands like pieces of my family's soul he was trying to steal. 50 years of careful collecting, each coin representing a milestone. Jackie's birth, her graduation, her first marriage to a man who'd actually loved our family. Finding everything you need, Herbert? He spun around, coins scattering across my desk like guilty secrets finally exposed. His face went white as paper, mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Louis, this isn't... Your daughter said... My daughter said what exactly? I stepped into the room, flipping on the overhead light. Herbert blinked in the sudden brightness, caught like a raccoon in headlights. That you could rob us while we ate dinner? That family meant so little she'd help you steal our security? It's not stealing. His voice cracked with desperation. Jackie said the coins were part of her inheritance anyway. We're just accessing it early. Accessing. I moved to my desk, gathering the scattered coins with deliberate calm. Each one represented years of sacrifice, careful budgeting, dreams of leaving something meaningful for the next generation. Is that what you call breaking into someone's home? Accessing? Herbert's hands fluttered uselessly at his sides. We're in debt, Louis. Serious debt. My business ventures, they didn't work out. You needed to get a job. I placed each coin back in its protective case with methodical precision. You needed to stop gambling other people's money on your schemes. You needed to be a man instead of a thief. But the airport, your mother's flight... My mother died 5 years ago. Herbert's confession tumbled out in panicked honesty. There is no delayed flight. There never was. Jackie and I planned this whole thing. The admission hit me like a physical blow, not because I hadn't suspected, but because hearing it confirmed the death of every hope I'd harbored for my daughter's innocence. She hadn't just allowed this. She'd orchestrated it. I pulled out my phone, Teresa's old one I'd grabbed from the kitchen drawer. Smile, Herbert. You're about to become evidence. The camera flash illuminated his terror as I documented the open safe, the scattered coins, his presence in my home. Each photo was another nail in the coffin of his criminal enterprise, another piece of justice being methodically constructed. Louis, please, we can work something out. I'll pay you back, with interest. Just don't what? Don't call the police? Don't protect my family from thieves? I continued photographing, my hands steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Don't hold criminals accountable for their crimes? Herbert backed toward the window, realizing his situation was beyond salvation. What about Jackie? She's your daughter. This will destroy her career, her reputation. Jackie made her choice when she chose you over us. I lowered the phone, looking directly into his eyes. She chose money over family, theft over trust. Now she gets to live with the consequences. He stood there for another moment, perhaps hoping for mercy that wouldn't come. Then, like the coward he'd always been, Herbert Simpson ran. Out of my study, through my house, into the November darkness where he belonged. I sat in my chair, surrounded by the remnants of attempted theft and family betrayal, and began planning my next moves. Justice required more than catching criminals. It required protecting the innocent and ensuring this never happened again. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and old money, appropriate for the business of protecting family assets from criminals. Margaret Wilson had handled our legal affairs for 15 years, but she'd never seen me this coldly determined before. I want Jacqueline removed from our will immediately, I said, sliding the photographs across her mahogany desk. And I want our assets protected from any future claims she might make. Margaret studied the images of Herbert at my safe, her professional composure never wavering. These are quite damning, Louis. Have you contacted the police? Not yet. I wanted the legal protections in place first. I leaned back in the client chair, feeling older, but somehow stronger than I had in months. My daughter chose her path. Now I'm choosing mine. Very well. We'll draft a new will today, removing Jacqueline as beneficiary. The coins, the house, everything will transfer to Teresa, then to a trust for any future legitimate heirs. Margaret's pen moved across legal pads with practiced efficiency. What about a restraining order? If they come near our property again, yes, but I suspect they'll be too busy dealing with other consequences to bother us further. 2 hours later, I returned home to find Teresa waiting with coffee and questions. I'd called her that morning, explaining everything. The conspiracy, the attempted theft, our daughter's betrayal. She'd cried, then grown quiet, then finally reached the same cold understanding I'd achieved. The papers are signed, I told her, accepting the warm mug gratefully. Our assets are protected. Jacqueline will inherit nothing unless she makes serious amends. And Herbert? Herbert is no longer our problem. I sipped the coffee, feeling warmth spread through my chest. Albert called while I was at the lawyer's office. He saw Herbert loading suitcases into their car this morning. Apparently they're leaving town. Good riddance. Teresa's voice carried a finality I'd never heard before. I never thought I'd say that about our own daughter, but good riddance. The phone rang, my landline, since my cell lay in pieces on Jackie's kitchen floor. Albert's voice brought the first genuine smile I'd felt in days. Louis, just checking on you after yesterday's excitement. Are you and Teresa all right? Better than all right, Albert. In fact, I owe you a debt of gratitude. If you hadn't been watching the house... I trailed off, thinking about what might have been stolen, what trust might have been shattered without discovery. Just being a good neighbor. Speaking of which, you two doing anything for Thanksgiving dinner today? I know yesterday got complicated. I looked at Teresa, who was already nodding with understanding. Albert, how would you like to join us for a proper Thanksgiving? Teresa still has that apple pie, and I think it's time we celebrated with family that actually deserves the name. 3 hours later, our dining room table was set for 3 instead of the crowd we'd originally planned. Teresa's apple pie sat in the center like a golden crown, finally appreciated by people who understood the love baked into every lattice strip. To real family, Albert raised his wine glass, his weathered face bright with genuine affection. To friends who watch out for each other, who value loyalty over money, who know what truly matters. To real family, Teresa and I echoed, clinking glasses with a man who'd proven himself more worthy than our own blood relatives. As we shared stories and laughter, I realized that Herbert and Jackie had done us an unexpected favor. They'd shown us the difference between family you're born with and family you choose. Between people who love you and people who love what you can give them. The gold coin sat safely in my study, protected by new legal documents and hard-won wisdom. But the real treasure was here at this table. 3 people who'd found each other through loyalty and tested affection, creating something more valuable than any inheritance. Outside, November wind rattled our windows. Inside, we were warm, grateful, and finally free from the toxicity that had been poisoning our holiday gatherings for years. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well with people who deserve your love. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.